What if the oil stopped flowing? The hidden crisis that could freeze the modern world. Imagine waking up tomorrow and the oil stops flowing. Pipelines stop, tankers stop, refineries go quiet, fuel deliveries freeze. At first, many people might assume cars stop moving, gas stations run dry, commuting becomes chaos. Serious, yes, but manageable. But that would only be the beginning. Because oil is not just gasoline. Oil is not just something you pump into a car. Oil is woven into the foundations of modern civilization: transportation, food, medicine, manufacturing, trade, military power, electric grids in some places, global supply chains, even everyday objects surrounding you right now. And if oil suddenly stopped flowing, the question is not simply what happens to fuel. The real question is what happens to modern society? And the answer is potentially far more dramatic than most people realize. Because oil is not merely a commodity, it is one of civilization's hidden operating systems. And if that system suddenly failed, the consequences could cascade everywhere. Chapter 1. Transportation would feel the shock. The first effects would be immediate. Cars, trucks, buses, shipping, aviation, rail systems that depend on diesel. Movement begins to strain. And movement is the bloodstream of modern economies. If transportation weakens, everything connected to transportation weakens, which is almost everything. Commuters struggle, deliveries slow, supply chains tighten, logistics costs explode, and disruption spreads fast, very fast. Because modern systems often rely on constant movement, not pauses. Chapter 2. Food systems could come under pressure. This is where many underestimate oil. People think food comes from farms, and it does. But modern food also runs through energy. Farm equipment often uses fuel. Fertilizer systems are energy intensive. Food processing uses energy. Packaging often depends on petroleum-based materials. Refrigerated transport depends on fuel. Trucking moves food. Stores depend on deliveries. Take oil stress seriously enough, and food systems can feel it. Not necessarily immediate collapse, but vulnerability. Scarcity risks, price spikes, distribution stress, and food insecurity can destabilize societies quickly. History shows that. Chapter 3. Supply chains could seize up. Modern supply chains are miracles of synchronization, but also fragile. Factories depend on inputs arriving on time. Retailers depend on inventory flows. Ports depend on movement. Warehouses depend on replenishment. Interrupt fuel long enough, and supply chains can begin choking. And once supply chains choke, shortages can emerge in unexpected places. Medicine, parts, consumer goods, industrial components. Things people assume are always available, suddenly aren't. That is when people realize abundance was infrastructure dependent. Chapter 4. Inflation could explode. Oil touches costs everywhere. Transport costs, production costs, shipping costs, input costs. When energy spikes, cost pressures can spread. And if oil stopped flowing dramatically enough, inflationary shock could be severe. Prices on essentials could surge. And inflation is not just economics. It can become political stress, social stress, confidence stress, because people feel inflation viscerally, especially in essentials. Chapter 5. The global economy could slow. Hard oil is deeply tied to growth. Industrial activity, trade, mobility, production disrupt oil severely. Global growth could take major hits, possibly recession, potentially worse. Because energy is foundational, you can substitute many things, but replacing major energy flows suddenly, very difficult, and difficulty at global scale becomes systemic risk. Chapter 6. Aviation could face immediate crisis. People often focus on cars, but aviation, extremely vulnerable. Commercial aviation depends heavily on jet fuel. Global travel, cargo aviation, tourism, air freight, all under pressure. And air freight matters more than people think. Critical goods often move by air. Interrupt that. Consequences spread beyond travel. Chapter 7. Hospitals and critical services could face pressure. This is where things turn serious. Emergency services rely on fuel, ambulances, backup generators, medical logistics, pharmaceutical transport, hospital supply chains. Even if priority systems protected critical sectors, stress would rise. And when critical services face stress, societies become fragile. Chapter 8. The military dimension could be enormous. Oil has long been tied to power, and military power especially. Ships, aircraft, ground vehicles, logistics, fuel matters. A severe oil disruption could become geopolitical crisis. Because energy shortages often carry strategic consequences, And history has shown energy shocks can reshape global politics. Chapter 9. Petrochemicals are everywhere. This surprises people. Oil isn't just fuel. It helps produce plastics, chemicals, packaging, synthetic materials, medical supplies, textiles, countless industrial products. Remove oil suddenly. It's not just transportation affected. Manufacturing ecosystems feel it. That changes the scale of the problem dramatically. Chapter 10. Cities depend more on oil than many realize. Modern cities depend on flows, food in, waste out, goods moving, transit functioning, emergency response operating. Cities are incredible systems, but they require inputs, interrupt key inputs. Cities can feel stress fast, very fast. Chapter 11. Agriculture could face long-term strain. This deserves separate emphasis, because agriculture is not simply tractors. Energy links run deep. Fuel, chemicals, transport, mechanization, and if those strain, food systems may face prolonged stress. That matters because food disruptions can trigger cascading instability. Chapter 12. Panic could make things worse. Sometimes systems break partly because people panic. Bank runs show this, supply panics show this. Energy shocks can trigger similar behavior. Fuel hoarding, panic buying, market overreaction. Fear amplifies disruption. Sometimes psychology magnifies crisis, sometimes dramatically, and that matters. Chapter 13. Financial markets could react violently. Markets hate uncertainty, systemic energy disruption, massive uncertainty. Volatility could spike, risk assets may plunge, credit conditions may tighten, confidence could weaken, and confidence is often underrated. Modern economies partly run on confidence, shock confidence, and damage can spread beyond physical shortages. Chapter 14. Could renewable energy save the day? Some may ask, would renewables offset this? Partly, maybe in some sectors, but sudden replacement of global oil dependence? Extremely difficult, especially for transport-heavy systems. Transition takes time, infrastructure, scale, capital, years, sometimes decades. That's the problem. The issue is not whether alternatives exist, it is whether they can replace oil suddenly. Very different question. Chapter 15, the crisis would reveal what oil really is. Most people think oil is a fuel, but in crisis, people might realize oil behaves more like infrastructure, like plumbing or electricity, something assumed until absent. And absence reveals dependence, often brutally. Chapter 16, nations might respond with rationing. Governments likely would intervene. Emergency reserves, rationing, strategic prioritization, critical supply protection, demand management. These responses could reduce damage, but the very need for them would show severity, and rationing itself can reshape society. Chapter 17. Some sectors might adapt faster than others. Not everything collapses equally. Some sectors adapt, some substitute, some prioritize, some digitize around disruption. Resilience exists. This is important. The scenario is not necessarily instant apocalypse, but severe disruption, potential cascading stress, massive adaptation pressure. That is serious enough. Chapter 18. It could accelerate an energy revolution. Paradoxically, a severe oil disruption might accelerate alternatives, electrification, nuclear, renewables, efficiency, storage, energy diversification. Crises sometimes speed transitions. History shows that. Pain can force innovation, but transitions born in crisis are costly, very costly. Chapter 19. The real lesson is about fragility. Maybe the scenario is less about oil and more about fragility. Modern systems can appear robust, but often rely on hidden assumptions, constant flows, stable energy, reliable logistics. Remove one foundation, and complexity becomes vulnerability. That may be the deeper lesson. Chapter 20. What would really happen if oil stopped flowing? So what would happen? Transportation would strain, supply chains could seize, food systems could face pressure, inflation could surge, markets could panic, critical services could be stressed, geopolitical risks could rise, industrial production could suffer, and modern life could become far more unstable, far faster than many imagine. Because oil doesn't just power vehicles, it helps power civilization. And maybe that is the shocking truth. Modern society often looks digital, cloud-based, high-tech, weightless. But beneath that, there is still steel, fuel, ships, chemicals, engines, physical systems, and oil runs through many of them. Which means if oil stopped flowing, the The crisis wouldn't simply be about energy, it could become a crisis of modernity itself. And maybe that is why this thought experiment matters, because it reveals something easy to forget. Civilization often feels permanent, automatic, inevitable.